Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's week 5, and we're going to be talking about characterization. Maybe when you were younger, or maybe even last week, you watched a movie or read a book and you fell in love with a character. I know I've done that 100 times with different characters, but the one that always stood out to me as a kid was Jo of Little Women. Now, that's going to mark me as a super nerd, but that's how it is. I loved her because she was spunky, she was independent. She was a feminist. She was a writer. She was smart. She didn't really fit in, and I understood that. She was creative and devoted to her family. There was a lot to admire about her as a character that kind of withstands the test of time in many respects, in my humble opinion, of course. And so when I was a kid, I would try to emulate Jo. One of the things Jo did all the time was she would go up into her attic, they called it a garret, and eat apples and write short stories. And I thought that was so cool. So when I was about 10 or 11, I didn't have an attic, so I climbed into a tree and I would eat apples and try to write short stories. I was all by myself, but I would have little conversations with the characters I'd create, and we'd have a lovely time together. I'm just illustrating how characters can get in your heads, and they live a life independently, um, sometimes of their stories, and that's where fan fiction comes from, obviously. But when you're thinking about characters that might appear in your personal narrative, think about how you can make them come to life so that others will feel as connected to them as you do. And so this whole week, we're talking about how to do that. How do we bring characters into focus? So let's just go through the assignments for the week, just so you get a sense of what that's all about. As you know, we've talked about our voice and our our persona, because we are characters on the page as well. The whole story comes through us. We are the storytellers, but we are quirky and flawed and complicated, and so it's important to be aware of how we characterize ourselves honestly. I'll let you read all of this jazz on your own. That's exciting stuff, I know. The readings and resources, though, are cool. So I'd like you to read Writing the Family and the Body of Identity. The reason I'm asking you to read these particular pieces is because if you are interested in writing about family or identity, they're important. So those are options for your personal narrative, obviously. But the family is full of characters, and how do you characterize fairly and faithfully? How do you maintain your honesty and your objectivity without getting so wrapped up in your own stuff? So that's a tricky thing. And then the body of identity. How do we see ourselves in a community, in the world? How do we identify ourselves, and to what groups do we identify? How do we characterize the worlds in which we identify? So there are lots of ways to think about characterization. And there is a cool chapter that is embedded in this week's module called The Building Blocks of Creative Nonfiction, Characterization, and Scene, because you're going to write a scene. The two model essays you're going to write about, you're going to choose two model essays to read from this collection. Gates in the Kitchen, I think I've mentioned this to you before, is about growing up in an African-American family, and the kitchen was kind of the hub of the house. It was also where his mother did hairdressing, and there's a double entendre about kitchen in there, and it's about culture, it's about identity, it's about family, it's about the whole works, and it's beautifully written. Jennifer Schaller, who works here at CNM, wrote a piece called Against a White Background, because she is a brown mom with a white husband who has mixed-race kids, and so this is her, how do you figure this piece out, right, in terms of identity. The Wishbone is very funny, but it's also insightful about a father-son relationship. Dad is an avid football coach, and son really isn't into football. He's into the arts, and somehow their worlds collide. It's funny, sad, funny, funny, sad. And Living Like Weasels. There are fantastic humans that aren't human. Animals can be our best friends and our most interesting counterpoints in the world. And so Dillard tries to characterize or imagine that she can characterize a weasel through eye-to-eye contact. I think you'll enjoy it. So you can choose whichever two of these that you'd like to read. Dive into them looking for characterization, culture, family, identity, the whole works. And we're going to take those apart in your blogs. So you do have 2 pieces of writing to do this week. One is your journal, one is your blog. Put some energy into this. So let me walk you through. Please read the notes on characterization. This will give you an overview of flat and round characters, protagonist, antagonist, and so on. I would like you to take a closer look at all of this. And I'll also share some works with you in the Hall of Fame shortly, but this will give you an overview of the types of things you need to understand in order to write both your journal and your blog. So please read that. Okay. This is the chapter on characterization, scene, and whatnot. It's really worth reading, and it will help you out as you start creating your own scenes. Now, as I'm getting to your journal, hang tight. Okay, here we go. You can choose any of the try it exercises on pages 188 and 189 after you've read a little bit about these characterization moves. Choose any one of them you like, but what I'd like you to do is paint a picture of a character or two, or you in relationship to a character. I would really like to see dialogue. I want to see you interacting using dialogue. I will post a little thing about how to format dialogue in just a minute. But it's not just dialogue. You want to paint a larger picture. So characters reveal themselves in a variety of ways through the words they speak, but also their inflection, their tone, their body language, what they wear, how do they move in the world, their actions. We read people all the time. We notice things about them. They give us clues about them all the time. It's how we pick them up and note them as we're writing that makes them come to life for the reader. So yes, we want dialogue, but we also need to see action. We probably need to see what they're wearing. What time of day is it? Where are they located? How are they interacting with their environments? And so when you read the model essays, you'll notice how the pros do it, and then practice. Ideally, eventually, you're going to have a scene with dialogue in your personal narrative, somewhere in there. It could be short, it could be long, it's up to you. But I'd like to see something. So if you have an idea for your narrative and you're ready to go, your personal essay that is, and you're ready to go and start writing, then think about practicing or drafting a scene that might appear in your narrative or your essay. Same thing, and so on. So practice, have fun with that. And as I said, you're going to be reading some really great writing this week, and see how people paint characters with words. Painting with words, yes indeed. So there are some questions here. Please introduce the essays you choose. Identify them by title, give us a brief summary so those who didn't read the essays you read will have a better understanding of why you chose them and what you're writing about. Identify at least one fully developed character. That's one of the round characters that is multi-dimensional on the page. And identify at least one flat character, one that you barely notice. Is just window dressing. Why is that person there? What role does that person play? And then consider how does the author characterize larger systems of family, culture, community, etc. Because our worlds are complex, and we can characterize them as well. If you chose the Dillard piece, you might be describing how the author characterizes a weasel. So many things to think about. Again, this is practice for you. You're thinking about what approach you're going to take to your essay. Next week, we will begin looking at arts and sciences and creative nonfiction. We'll look at how fine artists have written about art and sciences, and we'll look at structure and different ways to develop and pattern or to structure your essays so that we're not doing the same old thing you've done 100 times. We're going to try new things, new approaches. So that should do it for this week. Let me know if you have questions or concerns, and I will be sure to repost your essay prompt, but if you need to find that, it's in last week's module, and I'll post the bit about how to punctuate and format quotations. So thank you so much for your time, and please join me on Thursday at 10 a.m. for office hours if you have any questions, or you can send me a message through Pronto or email. Thanks a lot, y'all. Bye.